Relatable, maybe? If you're a parent in the room, there's probably a lot of scenes in that seem fairly familiar. I had the opportunity this week to go with my second family, our staff team, down to Atlanta for a conference, and it was fantastic. But we were getting ready to leave, and we were leaving really early on Monday morning, like really early. Like no one should be allowed to be awake at that hour of the day. But we did it somehow, I think. I don't remember most of it. But I remember the night before, Sunday night, I looked at my kids and I said, hey, I'm going to be gone for the next 3 days at a conference, and I'll see you guys then. And I had one kid get really emotional, and he came over, he gave me the biggest hug he's ever given me in his life, and he's like, I'm gonna miss you, I'll see you, and I'm like, I'll see you in 3 days, I'll be back, I promise I'll be back. Another kid came over, gave me a big hug, Dad, I'll see you in a few days, I'll miss you, I'll call you, and joys of FaceTime, you still get to see them, and then another one who looked at me and said, see ya. Parenting, like in one scene, it was just the most beautiful, heartfelt-ish moment that I've experienced as a parent. Maybe you've had a great experience like that. Maybe you've gotten the homework sent home from your kid who looks maybe a little bit something like this. Who's your hero? Dad. Why do you consider that person to be your hero? He is brave. Is there anything your hero is frightened of? Mom. As real life, like this is as true as it gets here in parenting as we do this. It's a crazy experience to raise a kid today. Anybody here agree with that? You're allowed to interact today, okay? It's crazy to raise a kid in today's climate, in today's generation. And the generations before us thought the same thing too, by the way. It's crazy to raise a kid in this generation, in this context. But we're looking at a generation right now that's growing up with access to screens 24/7. They have access to unlimited information at their fingertips all the time. I grew up with this little collection of books called an encyclopedia. And if you had to learn something, you'd go to that collection and you would open it and you would dig in and you would find things. And it was amazing. And they don't know what an encyclopedia is anymore. Like, I don't think my kids would know how to say that, let alone spell it or what it does. They just don't. We've got kids who have all of their relationships immediately accessible at their fingertips. And yet they're the loneliest generation in history. Wow. Like, it's crazy. I remember a day and age where I was unreachable. Like I didn't carry a phone everywhere I went. I could just be somewhere. Anybody remember that? Like, my kid's like, yeah, you remember that, Dad, because you were born in the 1900s. He reminds me of that all the time. And he's not wrong, but he is a little jerk sometimes. And we're working on it. We're working through this, They have information at the ready. There are questions of sexuality in our culture that they're having to navigate that we did not have to navigate as kids. There are experiences that we have COVID kids. We didn't know that experience as a kid. We didn't know that experience as an adult. Some of us would like to pretend that never existed. Some of us didn't even realize it did exist. We've got all sorts of people in this room. And it's okay. But we've navigated through that, and our kids grew up in that context and in a moment where they were forced to be isolated from the world around them. That has impacted the way that they were parented, the way that they were raised. All of these things go into the cultural climate we have today around parenting and kids. And we have statistically the most anxious and depressed generation ever right in front of us. And here we are as parents going, what do we do with that? Like, how do I keep moving forward? What am I supposed to do? How do I help my kids? And we get to the idea that maybe we need a good example, but there's no perfect example anywhere to be found. Even in this book, there's not a perfect example of parents to be found. And it's like, well, then what do we do with that? How can you win at parenting then? How can you win at parenting? That's the question that we need to ask as we get going. How can you? And there's one problem with this, that we don't know if that's even possible. The other bigger problem is we don't even know what it means to win at parent. Like, what is the win? That my kids are alive at the end of the day? Sometimes that's a win, okay? If you have ever parented, sometimes that is the win. Okay, there's two of us in this room. At the end of the day, at least one of us is going to be alive. I'm not sure which, but the goal is both. Okay, I know those feelings. I know that And so I want to ask this question as we get into this series: how do you win at parenting? And I'm going to tell you up front in this series is for everyone. This series is for everyone. Maybe you are a part of a traditional family and you are parenting in that context. Maybe you co-parent. Maybe you're part of a blended family. Maybe you're a single parent. Maybe you are an aunt or an uncle. Maybe you're a teacher. Maybe you don't have kids and you don't ever plan on it. Maybe you don't have kids, but you would like that someday. Whatever your situation is, I want you to hear this, and I want you to feel this. That has value. You have value, okay? Whether you're a grandparent, whether you're a parent, whether you're not a parent, the perspective you bring to the table has value. And every kid has value. And you have influence over a kid in your life in some way, shape, or form. You do, and you always will. There will always be somebody in a generation underneath you that you get the ability and the opportunity to impact and to raise and to help them to develop and to know what faith is. Whether it is your own child or someone else's child, you have the opportunity to impact a kid for eternity. So it's a big weight that we carry. It's a big opportunity. It's a big exciting thing that we get to do sometimes. But I want you to build into this series and know that this is going to give you principles that will help you influence the next generation better and will make you more confident in doing that. And this series is designed to build, okay? So over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about this, and I want to encourage you and invite you to come every week because it's going to keep layering and keep digging a little bit further into what this means as we get going. Okay, how many in this room are parents? Okay, a good number. If you're watching online, there's a good chance that's you as well. If you remember this, bringing home your first child, that is a wild experience. Like, the whole process is wild. I remember with our firstborn going to the hospital, and I said, Stephanie, I think you're in labor, we should go. And she's like, I'm not in labor, it's fine. I'm like, no, let's go. And so we went, and turns out I was right. I'm going to hold that card forever. And so we were there in the hospital, and she's laboring for hours. And I would love to tell you that I was actively engaged in that process the whole time, but I confidently fell asleep several times through this process. And she will not let me forget that. So we have kind of this thing over each other, right? And so this process goes, and it's overnight, which is why I was tired also. That's a lot of work, and I didn't even do the work. And so we're there, and at one point the nurse looked at Stephanie and said, okay, you should feel like you need to push anytime now. And she's like, nope, I don't feel that at all. She's like, well, you should be feeling it about now. And she's like, yeah, nope. And so they do some tests, and they're checking heart rates and all this, and all of a sudden Elijah's heart rate just dropped quickly, very quickly. And so within a minute and a half, we go from Dave semi-sleeping next to his wife getting his hand squished to death to we're in the OR and a baby is now out. Like, it was insane how quickly this happened, and it turned out Elijah's cord was wrapped around his neck. And it was just great. Like, it was an emotional roller coaster of a 2-minute span. And then all of a sudden I'm holding this baby, and you're supposed to know what to do with it. No one taught me that. Like, here's a baby. Cool. And then 3 days later, they send you home and wave at you and go, good luck. They didn't say good luck, but you might as well. If you're a nurse and an OB floor, just yell good luck on their way out. That's all you need to do. Nobody gave me a manual. Nobody said, here's what you do next. All of a sudden, I find myself in a situation where we're feeding the baby and then changing diapers. And then guess what we do next? We feed a baby and we change diapers. And then we feed the baby, and then we change diapers. And then we change diapers again because we thought he was done, but he's still going, okay? And so we're back at it. And then we feed, and you find yourself really sleeping really well, you know, like really fulfilled. No, like, you don't sleep. Actually, a study just came out that said that parents live in a slightly sleep-deprived state for the first 7 years of their kid's life. I think that's true. I think it's absolutely true. But the problem is, when you're sleep deprived, you're in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you're not making the best long-term decisions of your life. You're just trying to make it through the day. But a lot of us spend our entire parenting career in that stage. Survival mode. We're going to get through this season. And once this season is done, we're going to make it through the next season. Then we're going to make it through the next season. And my goal is that we're all coming out alive. And that's not a bad goal, okay? If that's not your goal, make that one of your goals, okay? That we all come out alive. And this is true whether you are a Jesus follower or you're just here asking questions and you're not even sure where you stand on a faith issue. We've got all of the spectrums in this room. But this is true for all of us. We spend so much time in the survival mode, it's hard to even consider what the target is. What are we aiming for? What are we trying to develop in our kids? How do you win? What is a win? I don't even know what to do with that. And so what I want us to do as a follower of Jesus, we look to the Word of God for truth. We look to the Word of God for guidance and understanding. And so we're going to go old school. We're going to flip it to the book of Proverbs. When I think about wisdom and guidance, I think about the book of Proverbs. It was written by King Solomon, who is known as one of the wisest men ever. He is the OG of wisdom, okay? He is that guy. And so in your Bible, if you brought it with you, you can flip it open to the middle. You'll be in the book of Psalms and just move one more book over. You're in the book of Proverbs. And Solomon wrote most of this. And this verse that I'm about to read from Proverbs 22 is one of the most famous over parenting. If you grew up in a church, there's a good chance you've heard this. Maybe you haven't, but I want us to look at it a little bit differently. And let's just start by reading this from Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. If you lay a great foundation, your kid will use that and will grow from that, and that will be their experience. Now, you need to understand this about the book of Proverbs. They're wisdom sayings. This is not prophecy. This is not saying this will come true. If you do this, this will happen. This is good advice that, if practiced, leads to the best possible results. Now, the problem when we get into sayings like this is a lot of us really, we look at this and we lean into the second half that my goal, I want my kid to have a faith in Jesus and not depart from it when they're old. That I look at that and I go, yes, that's it. That's what I want. Not always true for all people, but if I lay that foundation, they have something to build off of and something to go back to. But we get so caught in that we miss our goal, which is in the first part, to train up a child, to train them. Now, notice this doesn't say to train up your child. It's a child. So whether it's your kid or someone else's kid, you have influence over their life. You have the ability to impact them spiritually. So training up a child in the way they should go, that is the task of parenting. That is what's in front of us. Now, if you are active, you do things true, you understand the idea of training. Training is huge. I am a classically trained musician, so training for me meant hours in a practice room. Practicing. Some of you are sports people, and you spend hours practicing and training for the meet or the challenge or the race or the thing that's in front of you. You spend time and effort. Maybe you're into fitness, and that's you. Maybe you're an academic. Maybe you're a teacher and you put so much work into training your students in the educational material that they need to have for a test or for life skills or those sort of things. We train. Training is huge, but this is what you need to understand with training. Training always has a target. There is always an end goal to training. Nobody trains for the sake of just hoping that someday this may be a skill that I might use in life. You train toward an end goal. You train toward something. So what is that something? If you were to look at this in parenting and go, what is my target? What am I shooting for? What would you say it is? Maybe there's a chance you've never even asked that question. Maybe you've parented for years or a couple of decades and you've never asked the question of what was I even aiming at? Or did that target move and it shifted over time? Whether you have identified what this target is or not, you point kids there. You're already pointing kids at a target. And so asking the question makes you stop and go, okay, what am I pointing my kids toward? What am I pointing the next generation toward? Now, there's a lot of things that we do that we point people toward. We often point our kids here. I just want my kid to be happy. That's my goal. I want my kid to be happy in life. That's a great thought. If you have children, though, you understand this is the most impossible goal you could ever put out there. Like the moment you do the thing that would make your kid happy, they want something else. It is a moving target. Like this is good luck. Here we go. If you have more than one kid, you understand that if you make one kid happy, you're not making the others happy. So you can't do all of it. If you want a real life example of that, ask my kids where to go for lunch after church. Good grief. I would rather poke my eye out with a spork than go through that conversation again. And that was a weird example, but I'm going with it. You can't make all of them happy. That's why mom and dad get to pick today, because I'm going to be happy if somebody's going to be, no, like, the other problem with shooting for happiness as the target is what you're actually doing is you're teaching your children that life never hurts. And that's not real. Sometimes life hurts and we are unhappy, and we need to teach our kids how to navigate through moments like that too. So there's no way. This can't be your primary target. It just can't be. Maybe you've been aiming your kids here. I just want them to be successful. I want them to achieve something. I want them to do something that matters. I want them to experience success in life. That's a good goal, but it can't be the end goal. Maybe it's this one. I want them to be popular, because life is easier if you're popular. And if we're honest, adult relationships are what make the world go around. Relationships change everything. So there's some life skills that can come from this, but that can't be our end goal. Maybe, I'll just go ahead and say it, maybe this is your goal. Sports. Got to get our kids to the next thing. Got to get them that championship. Got to get that scholarship down the road. I got to get them that because this is the be-all, end-all. It's not, okay? Can I just tell you, it's not. Pickleball is not that cool, okay? Maybe it's this one. Maybe I want my kid to be good at the thing that I was never good at, that I wished I were good at. And we try to push them toward our dreams. The problem is those are our dreams, not theirs. That's not your kid's goal. It can't be your kid's goal. Please don't make it yours. Maybe you want your kids, the goal is that they're well behaved. I want that too, okay? I'm working on it. I haven't figured it out quite yet. If you take your kids out to lunch, you'll understand which behaviors are not quite there yet, because you're out in public and you're like, please just don't embarrass me today. Please don't stand on this table. Please, oh, we did it, okay. Like, this is not a bad goal. This is a great goal. To have well-behaved children, well-behaved adults even, is a great goal. Or maybe, honestly, this is the most dangerous in today's culture, in my opinion. Kid's choice. You pick the target, and I will support you in that. That's not parenting. That's letting your kids lead. That's not your role. That's not their role. It's not bad for kids to have a goal and a dream, but I need to be pointing them somewhere better. And so what I want to do is kick it back even older school. We're going farther back. And I want us to turn to the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to look at Moses. And Moses was the leader of God's chosen people. From like the beginning of having a leader, it's basically Moses. Moses was the man who led them out of Egypt, who led them out of slavery, who led God's people forward toward the promised land that God said was coming for them. Moses led the way. And then God said, hey, by the way, you're leading your people here to this promised land, but you're not going to get to go in. The next generation is going to get to go in. And so Moses has this series of speeches that empower people to invest in the next generation because it matters. Because what they've experienced, slavery in Egypt, all of God's provision, all of where God has taken them, they've experienced that, but the next generation won't, and there's life lessons to be learned. So make sure you share that, make sure you impart that with the next generation. And so if we're looking at what the target is, these are not necessarily all bad targets in and of themselves, but let me say this. Our target cannot be defined by culture. Our target cannot be defined by feelings. Our target needs to be defined by God's truth. And so that's where we need to turn, and that's where we need to look. And that's why we're digging into this in Deuteronomy 6, where Moses says this. These are the commands, the decrees, and regulations that the Lord commanded me to teach you. Okay, so God commanded these be taught. We better pay attention, okay? I'm just going to say it. You must obey them in the land you're about to enter and occupy, and you and your children and grandchildren must fear the Lord your God as long as you live. If you obey all his decrees and commands, you will enjoy a long life. The generational expectation is set right there in that statement. This is the generational goal. Keep going. Listen closely, Israel, and be careful to obey. Then all will go well with you, and you will have many children in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord alone. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. He's not just laying the foundation for the generational expectation. He's saying, who does it start with? The focus is not on the kids. The The focus is on you. You must love and obey God. That's where it starts. You and your relationship matters. Keep going, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Now we're taking it to the next generation. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them on your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Now he's setting the model for parents that we are to teach our family. We are to lead our family toward this relationship, to help them to know who God is. The end goal for Moses was very clear and very simple. It was to know God. And I want the next generations to know God because it changes everything when you can do that. And so all of our training should be pointing our children toward a relationship with Jesus. Every bit of it. Now you might look at that and go, well, what about those other things? Are those bad? No, they're not bad. Not bad at all. And you might also look at this and go, well, Dave, that's a no-brainer. We're in church. Of course you're going to say, your goal is to point your kids to a relationship with Jesus. And you know what? You're right. But let me ask a question. Is every ounce of your parenting doing that? Is every bit of your parenting pointing your kids toward a relationship with Jesus? Or are the other things crowding in and creeping up and starting to overtake it? Sometimes that target shifts and moves, and sometimes this isn't truly at the center. And we've got to be working toward that. We've got to be working toward that relationship with Jesus. I had a conversation with an old friend this week. I've known him for, goodness me, a long time. I actually had his daughter as a college student at CMU when I was in campus ministry. She was a CMU student, and I remember her very well. She was a fantastic young lady. And she met with some people while she was on campus who challenged her to go do long-term missions in China, to go share the gospel in China. And she asked myself and the other pastor on the staff at the time what we thought about that, and we encouraged her, if God's putting that on your heart, go do that thing. I remember that very clearly. Well, he came up to me this week, and he looked me in the eyes, and he said, Dave, I need to talk to you. I'm going to be real honest. As a pastor, when someone says that, it's not usually about to be fun, okay? But he looked at me and said, Dave, I owe you an apology. I'm like, well, let's talk. I'll listen to this conversation. And he said, Dave, I owe you an apology. I was really mad at you for a long time. And I said, please tell me why, because I have no idea what we're talking about here. He said, you encouraged and challenged my daughter to go to China to go do this missions thing, and I was very much against it, and I held it against you for a long time. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I would like to say sorry, but I'm not necessarily sorry. But as we were talking, he said, Dave, you don't understand what that did for my family. And he starts welling up with tears. And he said, my daughter experienced Jesus firsthand and grew in her relationship with God. And we, as a family, got to experience Jesus because of her experiencing Jesus. And we are closer as a family to Jesus, and we are closer to a family now than we've ever been before. And I owe you an apology. And I thought, my goodness, like the weight of this experience, when you actually put Jesus at the center, what happens, and the life change that happens, and the transformation that happens, it's off the charts. It's next level. It was an unbelievable conversation, and it was so much fun to do that. But if you aim for Jesus as the target in your parenting, you parent with that end in mind. Every one of my decisions is pointed toward this end in mind. I want my kids to have a relationship with Jesus. When you're in survival mode, it is really hard to do this. When you're in survival mode, you really get to a place in your parenting where you're simply just checking in with them at the end of the day. How was your day? How was school? But I got to tell you, the condition of your child's heart is more important than the achievements of their day. Please know this. Please invest in this. Please care for this. Your kids need it. You need it. Expose them to the joy of knowing God personally. More than just, do you have a good day? Me too. Expose your kids to the love of God and to a relationship with God. And when it comes to faith, I'm also going to tell you this. What happens at home is far more influential than church. It is far more influential than what happens at church. We get your kids for about an hour on Sunday. You get a lot more than that. The church was never God's plan A for parenting. Parents were God's plan A for parenting. So parent your kid well. Expose them to the joy of knowing Jesus. Help them to get to know him. The church is not plan A. Your kid's school is not plan A. You are plan A. The rest get to support and encourage and help and challenge and be there to be a part of that. But you as a parent have a responsibility. And I understand sometimes it gets real messy. I get it. It's real life. But coach your kids how to get through those stages. Expose them to that. Here's what aiming at the right target does, okay? You need to see this. Aiming at the right target does a few things for you. It gives clarity to your parenting. It helps you to keep the primary thing as the primary thing. It helps you to understand and keep that value first and foremost in your life. It helps you in a ton of ways. It gives purpose to your parenting. It helps you to say no to things. Did you know you're allowed to do that as a parent? You can say no. You're allowed to. My kids don't think this is a real thing, but it is. You can say no to that activity. You can say no to that event. You can say no to that attitude. You can say no to things, but here's the deal. You got to be able to tell them why. Why am I saying no? Having this as your target helps you to be able to have purpose to that. And it gives accountability to your parenting. It helps you to be able to measure whether you're doing a good job or not. To have that target clear and identified and in mind. But here's where I want to take you. I want to take you to the exact same place that Moses took you as we talked about this in Deuteronomy. If you want your kids to have a relationship with Jesus, you need to have one. You need to have one. It's this thing, like where we're on the airplane heading to Atlanta, and the flight attendants are giving the safety instructions, and they're doing this thing and this weird dance that they're all taught in flight attendant school, and no one pays attention to. You know that thing? Where turns out if there's an emergency, we are all toast because none of us listen to that, right? But they do this. But they say this thing where if the mask falls from the ceiling, you're supposed to do what? Put the mask on yourself before helping someone else. If you want your kids to have a relationship with Jesus, put the dang mask on yourself first. Like, can I be real? Grow up your faith. Be real. You have got to mature your faith enough to be able to parent your kids' faith. You have to. Grow up your faith. Because it is your job as parents to spiritually feed your children. And I'm going to tell you this little nugget before I go. Kids eat the food you give them. So what are you modeling? What are you giving them? When life gets hard, are you teaching them how to turn to a bottle? Are you teaching them how to turn to a woman or a man? Are you teaching them how to turn toward a substance? Are you teaching them how to run when things get hard? Or are you teaching them to come back here and to let this ground you? Kids watch your model. They experience what you experience vicariously. They're a part. They're actively engaged all the time, and they are far more perceptive than you give them credit for. Point them to Jesus with your life, and you will show them a model that's worth replicating. You will show them something good. It is a parent's job to lead and to feed their family and to train them up. So train them up. Train them up. I want you to wrestle with one question this week, and then we'll keep going in the next weeks ahead. But I want you and your spouse, or you and your co-parent, or just you and Jesus, to ask this question. What's your target? What is my target? What am I shooting for right now? Is it this? Is it this? Have I never defined it and now it's time to? I want you to do that. And I want you to take the moment even before you start making plans or changes or adjustments to your parenting to get your relationship with Jesus right first. You. It starts there. It all starts there. Let me pray, and then we'll have some other experiences, and then I'll leave you with a little bit at the end here. God, we just pray right now, as we lead our kids, as we lead the next generation closer to you. I pray that you equip us and empower us, but I pray, God, over everything else right now, that it starts with us, that we get real about our own faith, that we show a faith that's worth replicating, that we show our kids what it means to love you, to care for you, to obey you, to follow you, to look to you first over everything else. And God, I pray that as we do that, we teach our children. We teach the children around us. We teach the students. We teach our nieces and nephews, our grandchildren, the kids that we know from across the street, what it means to live for you. God, would you show us your heart? Would you mold our hearts and help us to look more like you as we lean into you and as we follow you? God, we want to win at parenting. We want to do well, but we need your help. And so we look to you first, and we let you guide us forward. In Jesus' name, amen.